My wife laughed and said, "Teaching is for the poor. I don't date poor. Please stay with me as I tell you my story, and please don't forget to support our channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing with your loved ones." When she said it, it was over wine and candlelight in front of her friends who all owned something: bars, startups, real estate. I was just the teacher who wore sensible shoes and knew how to stretch a paycheck to the last dime. They laughed, and I laughed too, because what else do you do when your wife humiliates you in front of people who measure worth in square footage? But that laugh was a cut that never stopped bleeding. At home, I tried to pretend it was a joke. Claire kissed me goodnight, smelling of the perfume I bought her last Christmas, and said I was being too sensitive. But the way she looked at me afterward changed, like I was the slow one in the room, the one who didn't quite keep up. She started spending more time networking, dressing sharper, staying out late. I'd grade essays at the kitchen table while her phone lit up every few minutes, and every time I looked up, I caught my own reflection in the dark window, tired, patient, small. I didn't start suspecting anything until the bank called about our overdraft. I knew exactly how much we had. Teachers know how to track every cent, but suddenly it wasn't there. When I asked, she said it was a transfer. "You don't understand how business works," she told me. I believed her. God help me, I did. Then one morning, I went to her boutique early, just to surprise her. Through the window, I saw her with him. Jonah Mercer. Handsome in that careless, expensive way. She was laughing again, that same laugh she used when she said teaching was for the poor. I didn't go in. I just stood there, watching the woman I loved look at someone else the way she used to look at me. The day I caught them for real, I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I heard her upstairs, water running, his voice. I just walked out, sat in my car, and stared at the steering wheel until the sky went dark. Then I drove to work and taught a class about irony. When she left me, she said she needed space to grow. What she meant was she'd already planted herself somewhere else. Within a month, the boutique had a new sign: Claire Mercer Interiors. My name erased like chalk from a blackboard. People say revenge doesn't fix anything. Maybe that's true. But when I found those forged import labels in her back office, I realized it could fix something. I filed the complaint the same week as her big investor gala. They showed up mid-toast. Watching her face fall was like watching a mirror crack. Slow, silent, inevitable. She called me later, voice shaking, asking if I'd done it. I said, "You always said teaching was for the poor. Guess I just gave you a free lesson." And I hung up. After that dinner, Claire acted as if nothing had happened. She smiled, talked about work, and scrolled through her phone as if she hadn't said something that tore a hole straight through me. I kept waiting for her to bring it up, to say she was sorry or even admit she'd gone too far. But days passed, and silence settled between us like fog, thick, cold, impossible to see through. At school, I kept my face steady. My students were in the middle of writing essays about integrity, and I listened to them read their drafts with bright eyes, their voices full of belief. I nodded and told them their words mattered. But inside, I felt like a hollow outline of myself. Every time one of them smiled at me, I wondered if they could tell I was pretending to be fine. After work, I'd drive home and sit in the car for a few minutes before going inside, just to prepare for whatever version of Claire I would meet. Sometimes she was cheerful, talking about new business ideas. Other times, she was distracted, staring at her phone, her thumb flicking fast over the screen. The house smelled like new perfume, a sharp, expensive kind I hadn't noticed before. I started seeing small changes. New dresses in the closet, designer shoes I didn't recognize, a handbag that cost more than my monthly salary. When I asked if business was doing that well, she smiled and said, "You worry too much, Mara. It's called investing in yourself." At night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing her laugh from that dinner, the way she'd said, "Teaching is for the poor," like it was just a fact. I replayed it again and again until it stopped feeling like a joke and started sounding like the truth she'd always believed. I tried to tell myself she didn't mean it, but something in her eyes that night told me otherwise. A week later, I noticed the first overdraft alert. Our joint account was nearly empty. I went through the online statements and saw transactions I didn't recognize: hotel bookings, boutique supply charges, large cash withdrawals. When I asked about them, she didn't even look up from her phone. "It's just business," she said. "Money moves around. You wouldn't understand." I wanted to believe her. For years, I'd trusted that if she said something, it was true. But now, even her voice felt like it was keeping something from me. At school, I stayed late, grading papers long after the halls were empty. The quiet helped. No laughter, no perfume, no half-truths. Just me and the scratching of pens across the page. Some nights, I'd catch myself staring at the empty desks and wondering when my life had started to feel like one of my own lessons. A story about loyalty, about people who don't see what's right in front of them until it's too late. At home, the distance between us grew without a single argument. She talked less. I asked fewer questions. It was as if we both knew something was breaking, but neither wanted to be the one to say it out loud. Then one evening, I looked at her across the dinner table. She was typing on her phone again, smiling at the screen. For the first time, I didn't ask who it was. I just watched, quietly realizing that I was sitting beside someone who'd already left me. She just hadn't packed her things yet. The first sign that something was wrong came with a red envelope from the bank. I thought it was another statement, but inside was a notice that our mortgage payment hadn't gone through. I stared at it, confused, because our salaries were enough to cover the bills easily. I waited for Claire to come home and showed it to her. She barely glanced at it before saying, "It's just a transfer delay. Business funds move around all the time." Then she kissed my cheek, smiled, and went upstairs to take a call. But over the next week, more bills started bouncing. The electric company called, and our internet got disconnected for a day. Each time I asked about it, she gave a new excuse, something about a payment cycle or an account mix-up. I wanted to believe her, but her voice sounded rehearsed, like she'd practiced her answers before speaking. Then, one afternoon, a man came to our door carrying a delivery slip and a clipboard. He said he was from a supplier and needed Claire's signature for a shipment that hadn't been paid for. He looked embarrassed, like he didn't want to be there. I told him I didn't know anything about it. His eyes said he didn't believe me. That evening, after Claire went out to meet a client, I stood in her home office. It always smelled like candle wax and cedar, her signature scent. I'd never gone through her things before. It felt wrong, but something in me had shifted. I opened the bottom drawer she always kept locked. The key was taped under the desk, exactly where I hoped it would be. Inside, there were neat folders and a small pile of receipts. I flipped through them slowly. Hotel bookings. Dinners at expensive restaurants I'd never heard of. Jewelry purchases labeled business gifts. And one name that appeared over and over, Jonah Mercer. The handwriting was hers. The initials at the bottom were hers. For a long moment, I just stood there, staring at the papers, trying to breathe evenly. It wasn't anger yet, just disbelief that the person I shared my life with could lie so smoothly, so easily. When she came home that night, she was humming, her cheeks pink from the cold. I watched her move around the kitchen, pour herself a glass of wine, check her phone. She looked happy, relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in months. I wanted to ask her who Jonah was, where she'd been, why she needed hotel rooms when we lived 15 minutes from downtown. But I said nothing. I needed to see it with my own eyes. The next morning, before sunrise, I drove to her boutique. The town was quiet, streets still damp from last night's rain. Through the glass front, I saw her. She was standing beside a tall man with dark hair, Jonah. They were laughing together, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to look at him. I didn't knock. I didn't go inside. I just stood on the sidewalk until my fingers went numb. Then I turned, walked back to my car, and sat there for a while. My heart wasn't racing. It was slow, heavy. Something inside me had cracked, but I stayed calm. I didn't want to fight. I wanted the truth. And now I knew where to find it. It was a Thursday, cold but bright. Classes were canceled early because of a staff meeting that got postponed. So I decided to surprise Claire with lunch. I picked up her favorite salad and a small lemon tart from the bakery near the school. The drive home felt oddly light, like maybe things between us could still find their way back to normal. I told myself she'd smile when she saw me. When I unlocked the front door, the house was quiet at first, too quiet. Then I caught the scent of her perfume hanging heavy in the air, sweet, strong, almost suffocating. A sound drifted from upstairs. Water running. Then a man's voice. Jonah's. I stopped in the hallway, still holding the paper bag with lunch. My hands went cold, but I didn't move. Then came her laugh, soft, careless, the same one she used when she wanted to sound irresistible. For a second, my body just locked up. My mind didn't even want to form the thought of what was happening upstairs. I stood there long enough to hear the faint sound of water splash, and that was enough. I turned around, walked out, and shut the door quietly behind me. The bag in my hand crumpled. The salad spilled in the car seat as I sat down. I didn't start the engine right away. I just stared through the windshield at nothing, listening to the faint echo of that laugh replaying again and again. I ended up driving without thinking, just turning corners until I pulled into the school parking lot. The building was empty, the afternoon sun low and orange. I parked by the far fence, rested my head against the steering wheel, and let everything pour out. No sound, just shaking. My throat burned from holding it all in too long. After a while, I looked at the clock. I had 20 minutes before my next class. I wiped my face, fixed my hair in the mirror, and told myself to move. The moment the classroom door opened, I smiled at my students. I explained grammar rules and corrected essays as if my entire world hadn't just fallen apart an hour ago. That night, I came home to find the house dark. Her things were gone from the bathroom counter. Half the closet was empty. My phone buzzed, a message from Claire. "We need to talk." When she showed up, she didn't look guilty or afraid. She looked calm, like she'd already made up her mind. She talked about how she needed to find herself, how I didn't push her enough, how she wanted more out of life. The words were smooth, practiced, almost kind. I didn't argue. I just listened until the sound of her voice became distant. She said she'd stay somewhere else for a while, that it was temporary. But when she left, she didn't take a suitcase, she took everything that mattered. From the window, I watched her get into Jonah's car. They didn't rush. She laughed as he opened the door for her, that same easy laugh I used to love. The car drove off, turning the corner slowly, and for the first time in weeks, the house fell completely still. I stood there for a long time, staring at the space she'd left behind. The silence was heavier than any argument could have been. The week after Claire left felt unreal. I went to work, taught my classes, and answered questions like nothing had happened. But people's eyes lingered on me longer than usual. By Monday, the whispers started. A friend from the English department mentioned seeing Claire downtown, holding hands with Jonah outside a cafe. They weren't hiding anymore. They looked comfortable, laughing in public like a happy couple. I forced a smile and said nothing, but inside it felt like every rumor was a small cut I had to pretend didn't hurt. 2 days later, my principal called me into his office. He looked uncomfortable, as if he'd rather be anywhere else. He told me the bank had called the school, trying to verify my employment because of a joint account issue. My stomach dropped. After work, I drove straight to the bank. The woman at the desk explained that the remaining money, our entire savings, had been withdrawn 2 days before Claire moved out. Every cent. My name was still on the account, but the money was gone. That night, I went to Claire's boutique. The sign above the door had changed. It no longer said Ellison and Beaumont. Now it read Claire Mercer Interiors. My name, our name, was gone. Inside, everything looked different too, new colors, new logo, new price tags. A fresh beginning for her, built out of what used to be ours. The landlord called the next morning. The mortgage hadn't been paid for 2 months. I didn't even argue. The papers he sent confirmed it. I couldn't afford to stay. By the end of the week, I packed what I could into boxes and loaded them into my small car. I didn't take much. Most of what filled that house reminded me of her. A coworker named Carmen heard what happened and offered me her basement apartment. It was small, with low ceilings and old carpet, but it was warm and quiet. I thanked her and promised it was temporary. When I lay down that first night, the ceiling had a long crack running across it. I stared at it until I fell asleep, my mind empty, my chest heavy. Days blurred together. I went to school, stood in front of students, and taught them about literature, irony, and tone. It was almost funny, talking about betrayal in stories when I was living one. After class, I'd stay late to grade papers just to avoid going home to that empty room. The silence there was too loud. I tried to distract myself with work, but everywhere I turned, someone mentioned Claire's new store or how successful she looked. Even the local paper ran a small article about her rebranding. I cut it out and threw it away before finishing the headline. Sometimes, late at night, I caught myself scrolling through old photos on my phone. Her smile used to mean something to me. Now it looked practiced, rehearsed. I realized she'd been preparing for this, her exit, her new life, for longer than I wanted to admit. The sadness stayed for a while, heavy and sharp. But beneath it, something else started to form. A low, steady anger. It wasn't wild or loud. It was calm, quiet, patient, the kind of feeling that waits for the right moment. I didn't want revenge then, not yet. I just wanted to stop feeling like a victim. I wanted to stand up again, even if I had to do it alone. I told myself I was only going back to the boutique to pick up some leftover mail that might have been sent there. It had been weeks since I'd seen the place, and I wasn't sure I was ready, but something in me needed to face it once more. When I walked in, the bell above the door gave a small chime. The shop looked brighter than before, almost sterile. New paint, expensive candles, fake smiles behind the counter. Claire wasn't there. Jonah was. He was standing near the back, talking to a man I didn't recognize. They didn't see me at first. I moved quietly, pretending to browse the shelves while I waited for someone to help me. Their voices carried across the room. Jonah sounded irritated, his tone sharp. "You'll get your payment when the investors come through," he said. The other man didn't look convinced. I caught the words cash flow issues before they noticed me and lowered their voices. Something about the conversation stuck in my mind. I glanced at the shelves. Most of the items had small gold stickers marked imported from France or handcrafted in Italy. But when I picked one up, the label looked printed on cheap paper, the font uneven. My years as an English teacher made me notice tiny things: spelling, formatting, the way something looked off. I checked a few more. Every one of them looked fake. The girl at the register came over, asking if she could help me. I smiled and said I was just there to collect old mail. She nodded and went to the back. I waited near the counter and caught another bit of Jonah's voice, quieter this time. "As long as the paperwork stays clean, we're fine. Claire's the one who signed off on everything anyway." That line made my pulse quicken. I didn't ask questions, didn't let on that I'd heard him. When the employee returned with a few envelopes, I thanked her, walked out calmly, and didn't look back. Outside, the air felt cold, sharp. My hands trembled as I unlocked the car door. I sat there for a minute thinking. The pieces didn't make sense yet, but I knew there was something wrong. Claire had rebranded everything under her own name. Every product, every contract. If there were fake labels, she'd be the one responsible. Jonah might have talked her into it, but her signature would be on the paperwork. The next day, I went to the county clerk's office on my lunch break. The woman behind the counter helped me search the business filings. There it was, Claire Mercer Interiors. Sole owner, Claire Beaumont Mercer. No partners, no co-signers. Jonah Mercer listed only as independent consultant. I copied the details carefully, every line, every date. From there, I visited the local trade department and asked a few questions about import licenses. The clerk explained that selling imported goods without proper certification could lead to fines or even a fraud investigation. I walked out with a pamphlet in my hand and a strange, quiet calm in my chest. That night, for the first time since she'd left, I actually smiled. Not because I missed her, and not because I'd forgiven her. It was something colder, cleaner. Claire had built her world on pretending. She'd laughed at me for being small, predictable, harmless. But she had no idea that the same patience she mocked would be the thing that undid her. I began by visiting places no one would expect a teacher to go: business offices, supplier warehouses, and the quiet corners of government buildings where people still used paper files. Each step was careful. I didn't want emotion to guide me anymore. I wanted facts, dates, and signatures. The first folder I built was thin, only a few printed invoices and receipts with mismatched stamps. But over time, it grew thick with evidence. Every late delivery notice, every supplier message marked unpaid, told a story she'd tried to hide. I remembered the night I'd found those fake labels. That image kept me steady. I went through her boutique's website and social media pages, printing every product photo that claimed to be imported. Then, I matched them with supplier lists I found through public databases. Most of the brands didn't even exist. What she was selling was built on lies. Once I had enough to connect the dots, I called someone my father had once trusted, a lawyer named Mr. Halpern. He was retired but still took on small cases for people he cared about. When I arrived at his small office above a bakery, he greeted me with a patient smile, the kind that said he'd seen too much of life to be easily surprised. I told him everything, showing him the stack of papers I'd collected. He listened quietly, only stopping to ask small questions. When I was done, he took off his glasses and leaned back. "You have more than you think," he said. "These forged certificates and the missing business funds from your joint account, they connect." He explained that since my name had once been part of the business, I was entitled to an audit and a share of its assets. More importantly, the fake imports could trigger a formal investigation. We spent hours organizing each document into labeled folders. He promised to file a petition to reclaim what was mine, but he warned me it would take time. Timing is everything, he said. File it when the damage will matter most. That night, I went home and looked up the date of Claire's upcoming expansion gala. It was being advertised everywhere, local newspapers, online invites, even banners outside her boutique. She planned to bring in new investors and turn her single store into a chain. It was the perfect moment. Over the next week, I finalized everything with Mr. Halpern. We prepared 2 separate actions: his legal claim on my behalf and an anonymous complaint I would submit to the Department of Commerce about the fake import certificates. I made sure they would both reach the right desks at the same time. Each evening, after teaching, I reviewed every line of paperwork until my eyes blurred. I wasn't angry anymore, not like before. I felt focused, calm, almost detached. Every form I signed, every page I copied, felt like placing one brick in a quiet wall between who I was and who I used to be. The night before the gala, I stood outside the boutique one last time. Lights glowed inside, people were setting up tables, and the smell of flowers drifted out the open door. I didn't go in. I turned away, walked to my car, and sent the final email to the Commerce Department. Then I shut my phone off. It wasn't revenge. It was simply giving truth the space to do its work. The night of my gala had started perfectly, glittering lights, flowing champagne, and laughter filling the air. But it ended in complete chaos. Inspectors arrived out of nowhere, papers in hand, asking questions that made my guests whisper nervously. Jonah, seeing everything unravel, slipped out quietly, leaving me to face the growing tension alone. I tried to keep my smile, to act like nothing was wrong, but it didn't last. By morning, my boutique's bank account was frozen, suppliers were calling non-stop, and I felt panic creeping in like never before. Jonah had vanished without a trace, moving money to offshore accounts. No explanations, no calls, just silence that cut deeper than any words could. I had trusted him with everything, my money, my business, even my judgment, and he betrayed that completely. Every call I missed from a supplier felt like a punch to my stomach. Every bank alert a reminder that my world was crumbling around me. In desperation, I called Mara. My voice trembled with anger and fear as I shouted, "Did you do this?" She didn't deny it. Instead, she spoke calmly, almost with satisfaction, reminding me of something I had ignored long ago. "You always said teaching was for the poor. Looks like you should have paid more attention to ethics." Her words hit me harder than any financial loss. I realized that my downfall wasn't only Jonah's doing. It had been enabled by my own choices, my own blind spots. I had ignored red flags, compromised my values, and now I was paying the price. My boutique, once a symbol of my success and taste, was suddenly under scrutiny. Clients who had once admired me were now questioning me, rumors spreading online faster than I could respond. The world I had built felt fragile, exposed. Mara, meanwhile, stayed untouchable, watching it all unfold. I could sense the quiet satisfaction in her voice, the lesson delivered perfectly. I had learned, perhaps too late, that this wasn't just about money. It was about accountability, about the consequences of trusting the wrong people and ignoring the warning signs. By evening, I was alone in my office, surrounded by unopened letters, missed calls, and the weight of everything I had lost. I felt drained, overwhelmed, and forced to confront the reality that my empire was not what I thought it was. The gala's sparkle had vanished, replaced by cold, hard truth. My plans, my dreams, even my confidence had all been shaken. I had learned a painful lesson. Some betrayals cannot be undone, and some mistakes are far too costly to ignore. A month had passed since everything fell apart, and I found myself standing in the school parking lot, feeling nothing like the confident woman I used to be. My clothes were soaked from the rain, my hair sticking to my face, and my hands trembling as I held them over my eyes to wipe away the streaks of makeup. I spotted Mara walking toward the building and forced myself forward, my voice breaking as I called her name. "Please, we need to talk," I said, my words barely carrying over the sound of the rain. "Jonah ruined everything. He took everything from me. I don't know what to do anymore." She stopped for a moment, but didn't look at me. Her face was calm, almost unreadable, and I could feel the emptiness behind her eyes. I expected anger, maybe gloating, but there was none of that. Just a quiet steadiness that made me feel smaller than I already did. I reached out, my voice shaking, trying to make her understand my desperation, but she stayed still, listening without a single reaction. After a long pause, she finally spoke. Her words were soft, almost too gentle for the storm raging inside me. "You taught me something," she said. You were right about teaching. It is for the poor. But you forgot something important. Poor doesn't mean powerless. Her words hit me like a wave, and I realized that all my anger, all my panic over Jonah and my boutique, had blinded me to the truth. Power doesn't always come from money or status. It comes from knowing your ground, from patience, and from the quiet strength to act when others underestimate you. Mara had that strength, and I hadn't even noticed until it was too late. I tried to say something, to defend myself, but the words stuck in my throat. The rain ran down my face, mixing with the remnants of mascara, and I felt my pride slipping away with every drop. I had expected revenge or spite, but Mara gave me nothing to fight against. She didn't gloat, she didn't celebrate my fall. She simply reminded me of the lesson I had ignored all along. She turned then, her figure moving gracefully toward the school entrance, her steps steady even on the wet pavement. I watched her go, feeling a hollow ache in my chest. The rain soaked through my clothes, but I barely noticed it. My body was numb from the realization that some mistakes, some betrayals, can't be undone by pleading or excuses. I had been blind to the power of patience, of quiet intelligence, and now it had left me behind. I stood there long after she disappeared inside, my hands covering my face as I let the rain wash over me. The storm around me seemed small compared to the storm I carried inside. For the first time, I understood that my downfall wasn't just about money, betrayal, or failures. It was about underestimating someone who seemed powerless and ignoring the lesson hidden in my own arrogance. I was left alone in the empty parking lot, drenched, humbled, and finally aware that some reckoning isn't loud. It comes quietly, leaving you to face yourself. Months went by, and life slowly started to feel steady again. I managed to win a small lawsuit that gave me back part of what was rightfully mine. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to buy a modest home and finally breathe without constant worry. The weight of betrayal was still there, but for the first time in a long while, I felt some relief. I could start over, piece by piece, without fear that everything I built could vanish overnight. I returned to teaching, but differently this time. I began leading a program for students from broken homes, helping them find stability and guidance I wished I had seen in my own life. Watching them grow, hearing their small victories, I realized that some of the most meaningful accomplishments don't come from wealth or recognition. They come from making a quiet difference in someone else's life. One morning, I stood in front of my class, reading a line that felt like it was meant for me as much as for them. Integrity is what you do when no one is watching. I paused and looked out the window. Outside, the schoolyard was calm, leaves drifting gently to the ground. The air smelled like autumn, crisp and fresh. I let myself smile, not from triumph, but from understanding. I had survived. I had rebuilt without needing to fight loudly or seek revenge through destruction. The thought of Claire still crossed my mind sometimes. I didn't hate her anymore, but I understood the truth clearly. My victory wasn't about proving her wrong or shaming her publicly. It wasn't about spectacle or loud confrontation. It was about reclaiming my life, dismantling the illusions that had allowed her power over me, and finally standing on solid ground. I had earned peace, not by breaking someone else, but by repairing my own foundation. I learned to appreciate small moments, the quiet mornings with my coffee, the laughter of children, the feeling of security in my own home. Life didn't feel perfect, but it felt honest and steady. I discovered that real strength comes from endurance, patience, and knowing that every setback can teach a lesson if I'm willing to listen. Walking through my neighborhood one afternoon, I noticed the way sunlight hit the rooftops, how leaves danced in the wind, and I felt a sense of calm I hadn't known in years. I wasn't chasing anyone's approval, and I didn't need validation from the past. I had built something real, something that belonged only to me, and that truth carried more weight than any flashy victory could. Autumn faded slowly, but the sense of stability remained. My life was quieter now, but it was mine. I could focus on teaching, on helping others, and on living without the constant shadow of betrayal. My past mistakes and the people who hurt me were no longer chains. They were reminders of lessons learned. My revenge had been subtle, not spectacular, but it was complete. I had rebuilt my life on honesty and strength, and for the first time I felt free. Do you think I handled everything the right way by standing up for myself and rebuilding my life? Or should I have tried to forgive and trust again? Share your thoughts in the comments. I really want to hear your opinion.